Gojo Satoru versus Saiki Kusuo, the strongest sorcerer versus the reluctant psychic. Gojo is celebrated for his limitless technique, most notably Infinity, a near impenetrable defense that stops any attack unless granted his explicit permission. But what happens when Gojo encounters an opponent whose abilities are so unconventional not even Infinity can handle? Saiki Kusuo, a high schooler whose greatest wish is to lead an ordinary life, though fate has granted him extraordinary psychic powers. Abilities so immense that he can alter the minds of everyone on the planet or rewrite reality itself. To truly see how this plays out, we'll examine them in a range of situations, starting with Gojo at his peak and using his full range of abilities, and Saiki without the limiters that he puts on to maintain a normal life. But strength isn't everything. Their personalities, goals, and unique ways of handling challenges are just as important. So, what happens when the strongest sorcerer meets a psychic who can change the world without lifting a finger? How do the psychic powers of Saiki compare to the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer? We'll look at the two characters' physical stats and abilities to determine who is stronger. Starting with Gojo, examining his speed feats place him at least at supersonic plus levels, though it is likely that he may be even faster. His ability to consistently speedblitz formidable opponents such as Toji, known for being among the fastest in JUJUTSU KAISEN, supports this. Toji's exceptional reflexes and speed are seen through his ability to effortlessly speedblitz people like Megumi, which underscores Gojo's domination of his verse. Furthermore, Gojo has shown the ability to keep up with Sukuna, even when Sukuna was being buffed by his domain expansion, demonstrating just how fast Gojo is in terms of pure speed. Domain expansion is specifically noted to improve your stats while fighting in it, so Gojo keeping pace while Sukuna, who is a supersonic fighter himself, is amping himself with domain expansion is notable in why Gojo may be even above supersonic plus. In that fight, it is also important to note that Gojo wasn't even focusing on pure speed, since he was simultaneously using his reverse curse technique to survive Sukuna's continuous attacks and to heal himself. Another notable demonstration of Gojo's speed comes during his fight with Jogo. Here, he was able to leave his fight with Jogo and return with Yuji in just a few seconds. Furthermore, most of that time was spent speaking with Yuji before returning. So, in the time it took Jogo to stand up after being hit from Gojo's curse technique red, he had returned with Yuji. Adding to his already impressive natural speed, Gojo's use of his signature curse technique, Limitless, further augments his mobility. Through this technique, he gains the ability to manipulate space itself. This grants him abilities such as flight and the power to compress space between 2 points. While this isn't pure speed, it significantly improves his overall maneuverability. Moving on to his attack potency. This stems primarily from Gojo's application of curse techniques. While his power output varies, we'll take a look at his most impressive showings. Gojo's attacks easily scale to city level with his hollow purple technique, being able to destroy a large section of Shinjuku in a single attack while fighting Sukuna. When fighting Toji, he did something similar but to a lesser extent, with his technique ripping through buildings and everything else in its way. In terms of his raw power, Gojo can use his curse technique reversal to restore his curse energy, and he can use it to heal himself almost instantaneously. Whether he's injured or running low on energy, either one is addressable, meaning that in terms of stamina, Gojo is well into superhuman levels. However, Gojo's most potent ability is Infinity, a defense application of his curse technique Limitless. Gojo explains Infinity as a convergence of an infinite series, making things that approach him slow down the closer they get to touching him. This means that attacks will never actually reach him traveling through physical space. This is a barrier which Gojo can control, and he can decide what things specifically can or can't pass through the space of his Infinity and touch him. Infinity can repel both physical attacks and curse energy, so the nature of the attack doesn't allow it to penetrate his defenses. Only attacks which can affect space are able to breach Infinity. This includes a domain expansion which ignores the normal laws of space and allows any attack of the owner of the domain expansion to guarantee it hits its target. Gojo demonstrates as such to Yuji in his fight against Jogo, where he has to use curse technique to block Jogo's attack instead of using Infinity to prevent the attack from landing. All in all, Gojo is a very formidable opponent, and his true strength lies in his Infinity, making it almost impossible to hit him without a way to bypass it. In order to end up victorious, Saiki would need to be able to either completely overwhelm Gojo's Infinity or find a way to bypass it. Unfortunately for Gojo, Saiki does both. In terms of speed, while Gojo has impressive showings, Saiki just massively outscales them. He is able to fly from Tokyo, Japan to Washington DC in a fraction of a second, which scales him to 7 times the speed of light, or around 300 million meters per second. In terms of raw speed, Gojo could likely surpass 1000 meters per second, which is just nowhere close to what Saiki can do. This is a massive speed blitz in favor of Saiki. Now, Gojo's ability to compact space to teleport is notable, except that Saiki can also teleport. While his teleportation is far less effective while wearing his limiters, without them, Saiki can freely teleport instantly. The last factor to consider here is Gojo's infinity and the defense it provides him. Saiki's physical attacks will not be able to penetrate it, and other staples of his arsenal, such as his energy attacks or attacking with objects via his telekinesis, would also fail. However, Saiki's speed is again his key factor to victory. Gojo's infinity doesn't react instantly, which is a common misconception regarding his power. Infinity actually screens everything that would pass through it and allows Gojo to choose what can pass through normally and what can't. For example, he is constantly allowing oxygen to pass through infinity, otherwise he would suffocate. He can also pick up objects or touch things when he wants to. Gojo trained this to allow harmless things through while screening out harmful ones. He can do this simultaneously with multiple objects, which you saw when he trained to let an eraser pass through infinity when thrown at him, but stopping a pen. Infinity will also screen targets automatically to protect him against harmful things trying to pass through. All this being said, Infinity's defense isn't instantaneous. In the time it takes to screen something, Saiki can bypass it entirely by outspeeding it. Since Gojo has no feats of Infinity defending against any kind of speed blitz relative to Saiki's speed, he wouldn't be able to do so. Given that Saiki can completely overwhelm Gojo with speed, he can do the same to Infinity. This makes Saiki the clear-cut winner with speed alone. However, there are 2 more interesting comparisons to be made between these characters. First is making the assumption that Saiki cannot bypass Infinity via pure speed. In this matchup, Saiki can still speed blitz Gojo, but he will need to work around Infinity to do so. If Saiki cannot bypass Infinity with pure speed, how does this play out? For this matchup, we will need to look at Saiki's full arsenal more in depth to see how this will go. Since his physical attacks and energy attacks won't work, Saiki has a range of powers including telekinesis, which allows him to move things with his mind, telepathy, which allows him to read minds, invisibility, teleportation, flight, fire and electricity manipulation, illusion manipulation, force field creation, energy manipulation, astral projection, soul manipulation, duplication, and more. To top it all off, his most dangerous powers include mind control, which can manipulate reality itself by altering people's perception of it. Using this power, he made people with colored hair become common. He made it so buildings can be built in weeks instead of years. He made people heal from injuries extremely fast. He also made it so in important situations, the brain can process and think at superhuman speeds. He can manipulate time to either restore people or objects' conditions to 24 hours beforehand, or he can time leap and travel to either the past or future. When he does so, his body from the original time travels to the new time, and there will be 2 versions of Saiki in that time. If his other self realizes he time traveled, he returns to his original time. So how would Saiki be able to bypass Infinity under these circumstances? Well, there are a few options on how he could do so. He could use his telekinesis to manipulate Gojo's body directly without any need to bypass Infinity. Infinity only stops objects from reaching Gojo, but the object in question needs to be traveling through physical space. Telekinesis wouldn't move through physical space if he uses it on Gojo directly. Similarly, his mind control would also bypass Infinity since it doesn't travel through physical space either. Either of these abilities can bypass Infinity's defenses and would give Saiki win conditions. But what about Gojo? Here, he would need to defeat Saiki before he can use one of his win conditions to bypass Infinity. But will he be able to do that? Saiki still has a massive speed advantage, so even an attack like Purple wouldn't work since Gojo can't fire it fast enough. Saiki's superior speed would just allow him to dodge the attack without much difficulty. In this scenario, Gojo just doesn't have a strong enough win condition to beat Saiki. His superior speed and broader range of abilities just overwhelm him. In the second scenario, we will equalize speed between the 2 of them and prevent Saiki from using his powers that will directly affect Gojo while bypassing Infinity. In this scenario, the two of them will have equal speed, and therefore Saiki would be unable to blitz Gojo or bypass infinity with speed, or directly with powers such as telekinesis or mind control. We now have an actual closer battle. In this state, the battle would come down to who can more creatively employ their arsenal of abilities to win. Gojo can win by hitting Saiki with an attack such as purple, or trapping him in his domain expansion to defeat him. Gojo wouldn't instantaneously win by a domain expansion, but it is unlikely that Saiki could escape it. His hollow purple would likely be able to hurt Saiki, even giving his superior strength and regeneration. Saiki, on the other hand, would need to find ways to actually work around infinity. While he still has possible ways to do this, he needs to do so without being hit by Gojo's attacks. One such method is astral projection. He can separate his soul from his body and move around as an intangible being. In such a state, he could likely pass through infinity, but he would need to leave his physical body unattended to do so. To win, he could also try and teleport Gojo somewhere, like outer space, where the environment would kill him, since Saiki can survive in space himself. Additionally, in a bloodlusted situation, Saiki could actually destroy the planet itself to achieve this effect. Assuming the actual explosion won't kill Gojo because of infinity, he would still suffocate in space afterward. In the case where Gojo hits Saiki with an attack like purple, he still has multiple ways to recover. He can turn back time on himself to before the attack hits him, which would effectively heal the damage. Or depending on the actual damage taken, Saiki's base regeneration may be enough to recover. In the case of real emergency, he can still time leap into the past or teleport away to give himself time to heal. If Saiki is caught in domain expansion, his only way out is probably his time leap to before Gojo uses Infinite Void. It would be unlikely that his normal teleportation could escape it, so without a domain expansion of his own, time leap is the best option. So, no matter the scenario or the limits on Saiki's abilities we use, he is the overwhelming victor just about every time. His abilities are just too extensive for Gojo to overcome, even when his speed advantage is removed. This just isn't a fight Gojo can win. Saiki's overwhelming speed, his better arsenal of powers, and his abilities which can just bypass infinity are just too much for Gojo to compete with. While Gojo's powers and limitless technique are incredible, Saiki's speed, versatility, and reality warping abilities are just too much for him to handle. No matter how you look at it, Saiki comes out on top every single time.